will, but good session of Q&A. My role at Innovation 360, Director of Innovation, but also I'm involved in the Australian Committee of TC279, which is the standard around innovation management. What we'll go through is an overview of what the standard is, some history, the formation of the Australian Committee, and then the work program, what is it actually included within the standard. I'll talk to how you can apply the standard conceptually, so going from standard to application within a work environment. And hopefully that's certainly something of interest with the knowledge management crew. And then I'll hand it over to Peter to share a client example, which uses our not only ISO guiding standards, but our tools and methodologies, and then we'll facilitate a Q&A. So very quickly, here's another picture of Peter and I in a non-virtual world. I wear a shirt normally. Peter, does too. So we're from Innovation 360 Group. We're big on thought leadership. We've published a number of books, all led by Sweden. So Innovation 360 Group was originated in Sweden by a gentleman called Magnus Pinkner, who was a thought leader in innovation management. And part of the Innovation 360 Group in Sweden also sit and are involved in ISO. We're an innovation management consultancy with a global reach. We have offices in Stockholm, New York and Sydney, and recently Peter and I started the Australian subsidiary in Sydney, and we operate globally in a number of countries, and we also have licensed practitioners. I think some of them actually may have joined this session today, where we train on tools and methodologies of Innovation 360. Our mission is to help organisations all over the world strengthen their capabilities through innovation. A lot of companies want to innovate, but unfortunately they don't have the ability to innovate. So we focus on capability, the ability to innovate, and we use a data-driven approach, which will certainly labour the point significantly today. Our approach to innovation is it's a fairly holistic one. We start with insights, looking at capability and collecting data. And by starting there, we can use a tool of ours, which is an assessment or a diagnostic around innovation capability. We use that data then to inform a strategy, set up an innovation system, something we'll talk a lot to today as well, the innovation management system. And then we can move through to driving a process, ideation, selection, development, and commercialization within an organization, which should lead to a destination of profit and growth in an ideal world. So let's dive into ISO TC279. I don't know if this is being recorded, but I actually mentioned to someone else today that ISO certainly, people associate ISO with fairly rigid standards and seat belts and helmets and the ISO 9001, which is world renowned, and it's certainly not sexy, but the global collaboration that occurs as a result of ISO is very powerful. And the knowledge that we capture through ISO committees and working groups provides significant legitimacy to then feed into things like innovation, which unfortunately get a bad rap, and also can sometimes just be a lot of theatre. So ISO 279 stands for, TC stands for Technical Committee. And it was established in December 2013, so quite some time ago, and is currently coordinated by a group in France. It has a global participation. It's structured through committees and working groups that work on particular areas of the standard. Innovation 360 Group, a couple of guys in Sweden sit on the Swedish committee. And Australia has a seat on the table. we formed a committee late last year. Myself and a friend actually sit or represent IAOIP, another acronym, but there's a group of people that sit on the Australian committee. At the highest level, TC279 is about innovation management, and it's the standardization of tools, of terminology, tools, and methods, and the interaction of parties to enable innovation. So terminology, tools, and methods that really drive innovation. Worldwide, so we have, as part of every standard, there is a worldwide or broad representation in participating membership and observing membership. So currently there's 62 members that are part of TC279. Australia is a participating member, which means that the committee committee representing Australia actually participates in reviewing standards, which is happening right now. There's also observing members that are informed by what's developed, like our friends across the pond, New Zealand, are just observing members, not to be competitive, but participating and observing is still really, an advantage of being aware of what's involved in the standards. So global representation, which should give you some confidence that we're getting a global view of innovation management, and what works on a global scale to apply at an organisation. So the Australian Committee, a proposal was submitted using a Standards Australia form, which was certainly an exercise, and it was approved in collaboration with Standards Australia. And Standards Australia, who's the governing body of Australia, or representation for Australia in ISO, helped form a mirror committee. And that mirror committee is called MB279. And that mirror committee represents Australia and is one of those participating members. And the intention behind the proposal, even though TC279 had been going on since 2013, when we wrote the proposal, we really saw the importance of having a seat at the table and starting to learn about what's in the standard. If you're an innovation practitioner, it's always good, in my opinion, to start with an industry best practice and then shape as you need to. And that applies for many other standards, many other industries, and I'm sure many of you working in the knowledge management space as well. And we wanted to build, simplify and support the community within Australia, and share what ISO was doing around innovation management. Some official Standards Australian slides. Very serious on sharing information by Standards Australia. So these were developed by Standards Australia to share in circumstances like this. And Standards Australia's role is to facilitate the development of standards and make sure there's a positive contribution in Australia. So what we can do is, when a standard or a guide is developed by ISO, Australia has the opportunity to create its own version, its Australian version, that can be used in industry. Now, a point on ISO T79 is that it's a guide. So it's not a standard. You don't have to follow it for innovation and innovation management, but it gives you a guide on key parts, or which we'll go through today, that are involved in the standard. And if you were to use a standard, we want it to have a positive impact to Australian industries and companies. So the scope, as you'll be able, and ISO has a really good website that structures a lot of this information, so you can have a look at it either during this session or after the session. And we get involved, and Australia, through the committee, gets to look at all the published standards, the tools and methodologies and interactions that are being developed through the developing standards, and we can actually meet on a global they're called summits, I think, where all the committees can get together and discuss the standards, which happens on a yearly basis. I mentioned some of this, but we're certainly we have a seat on the table, which is great. We're participating in this, which is also great. Once standards are produced, they can be purchased, and the hope is that the standards are used by consultants and companies and within industries to have a positive or net benefit for Australia. So the work program for TC279 and the other I suppose reference is 56,000. So it is TC279 under innovation management, and what it includes is 4 key parts, and then there's principles within those parts, and the key parts have a guidance document, and there's 7 guidance documents at the moment developed, and there's a number that have been published. So there's been 4 documents that have been published, ready for purchase and consumption, and there's 3 that are yet to be published. So we're on our way to having a full suite of innovation management standards or guides that companies can use. So innovation management system, IMS, there was a working group applied to that managed the development of that guide, and there was global participation to determine what was in it, which we'll talk to today. So we'll talk a lot about innovation management system. Terminology has been established. So for Peter and I as consultants, we try to, and as a company, we try and look at the terminology that's available in standards, particularly innovation, and use that when we're having conversations, because we see, really important. I mean, defining innovation for some reason has lost its course, and unfortunately, there's many different types of definitions for innovation. If I was quizzed, the definition, which I should have had a slide on, is essentially new ideas that generate value. So simple to remember, but that then informs a process. Ideas go through a process. Well, you have to get ideas first, go through a process, deliver value. So that's included in terminology. Then there's tools and method. So partnerships has been established, which is, incredibly important in this day and age. How to structure a partnership around innovation, and that has a number. And then we have intellectual property management and idea management that isn't released. The red ones are unpublished, I should have mentioned. And then we have assessment, which we'll also talk to today. So the 2 that we'll talk to today in practical application is innovation management standard and assessment. Okay, but this is the working program for the standard, which is somewhat set, but 4 of the 7 are published. So core to 56,000, so innovation management it's all centered around the innovation management system. And there's an actual standard for innovation management system. It's called 56,002, which has been published. So it's there. It's available for companies to purchase and look at the framework and use that as a starting point to set up an innovation program, which I think is pretty cool. You take from the academic view and you apply it to the real world example. Peter's showing a copy that he's purchased. As a committee member, I get them free, but that's fine. I'm doing the work. But they're 40 page. How many pages are they, Peter? They're pretty heavy documents, but they're significant documents with a lot of information, and we can touch on some of the specifics in the Q&A, but available to purchase. So 56,002 is a guidance that's around managing innovation, and it's set on principles, 8 principles, and it's all driven through supportive culture and collaboration. So in the context of a business, the business can be an organization, it can be a startup, it can be a scale up, because innovation should be applied in as well to any business setting for new ideas that generate value. So here's the innovation management framework. I warned you that it was not sexy, but that there's key components within this framework. We won't go through this framework in itself, but we will certainly touch on certain parts. From this framework, we have 8 principles, but you can see here, this framework aligns with the definition or the term for innovation. And you've got that opportunities intent on the left-hand side, and you've got innovation value on the right-hand side. So that's what we're trying to achieve through innovation. And luckily, there's many different flavors of getting from new opportunities to new value, but that's what we're trying to achieve. There's an operation between the two, and it's set within the construct of the context of an organization, supported by leadership. There's plan, do, check, act, which is a continuous process for implementing projects. So that is the framework. So the key takeaway is that you can use this as a starting point to build an innovation management program. 8 principles that we'll actually talk to specifically today. And you've probably seen these before if you've been involved in an innovation program, consulted in the space. There's crossover with quality and management practice within this. But the principles of the innovation management system, which is 56002, which is sort of it's the core, realizing value, focused leadership, strategic direction, culture, insights, maintaining uncertainty, adaptability, systems approach. So again, you can take the framework, you can take the 8 principles, and that can inform, if you have some data, your innovation strategy to then manage something within your organization. Here is a core visual and how we start to see the application. And on the right-hand side is a model that Innovation 360 has developed, which is our innovation management system. So we talk to governance, process, and an organization. And they're just different words of some of the 8 principles that I covered earlier. And governance includes strategy, we've got a process, and then we've got an organization, supportive organization. Now, these came from, as you'll see on the left-hand side, the 56002. So the components of the 56002 as a starting point. And then we have the CEN 16555. And I don't want to throw that in for complication's sake, but that is the European version of the current standard that's going to be wrapped up into ISO anyway. So it's using the framework as a starting point to then establish a framework that works within in a different space. So we've talked a bit about Innovation 360, given the TC279 overview. Now that was certainly an overview, but just remember that there is an ISO website available. There's an Australian committee established, and it's a broad committee from different industries. It's not just a bunch of consultants. There's people from a design background, academia. So there's a good broad representation of Australian industries and experience as part of the committee. And there's 4 out of the 7 guides have been published, ready for your purchase. And I don't work for ISO, but they're available there for consumption. So I'll talk to some standard or guide application, and then Peter will give you a detailed case study around a client example. So so part of our holistic approach to innovation, we start with insights, and we try and make data-based decisions. when we work with organizations in the innovation space. And one of our tools is around assessing innovation capability. There is a published standard called 56004, which provides a framework for assessment. And as a company, we use that as a starting point. There was a European influence in the assessment version that you see on the left-hand side, but the left-hand side diagram is the 56004 framework for assessment. So it has prepare, conduct, conclude, which is your innovation management assessment, and then you improve to generate value. So on the right-hand side, you'll see our process, which is what we use when we do an assessment. And so we think it's very important to at least make the point that we are compliant with ISO that's being developed, which means that when we're working with organizations, and I'm sure everyone that's joined this webinar would agree, the knowledge and the knowledge sharing or the consulting that we're doing is based on some global best practice and global facts, instead of coming up with something that we've read in a book or found on the internet. Here's a similar example of what I showed previously, but this is now looking at how the assessment fits into our innovation management system. So again, on the right-hand side, this is how we view the innovation management system: governance, process, organization. And within the standard, what it says is the innovation management system requires an assessment of the system on a continuous basis. So therefore, you'll see that our assessment pre-post the innovation process uses the assessment standard that's been developed, as I showed you in the previous slide. So again, key takeaway is our own flavor of the innovation management system is aligning to published standards. And anything that we add into that, we've at least gone back to a part of the standard, so the assessment piece, as a way to ensure that it's in there to start with, and then we have the mechanics to align to the standards. So I don't know if there's any questions during Babak that we needed to answer, or should we move along?
I can't see any question,
Okay.
but maybe I've got one question right now,
Sure.
but I can ask. Oh, I can ask it later. That's fine.
Okay, no worries. Okay.
No worries.
Okay, so as I mentioned, let's talk to a real client example that we've kept anonymous, but at least specific to industry and client type. And in this section, Peter will go through some of the concepts that I've already gone through, but it will be in the context of the client example. So over to you, Peter.
Thanks, AJ. Yes, so I'm going to run through now, and we're going to start here first with the client example and just bring us back to these 8 principles that we talk about in the innovation management system. And normally in the way that we work, when we do an assessment or a diagnostic on an organisation, one thing is to collect all the data, and we use a survey approach, which is endorsed in the ISO 56004 assessment document. So that's one way you can collect information, is to use a survey. And we use an online survey. And that means that we're able to get to lots of people in the organisation. And in our approach, we do it at different levels as well. So instead of going in, somebody could buy this ISO 56004 document, for example, and go and do one-on-one interviews, just say with the CEO or with somebody else at the C-level inside an organisation. And you tend to get a series of single-person views about the organisation. And that might be right or not. So we took the approach that says, what we want to do, and that's where the 360 comes in, coming at it from different angles, is so we want to understand what is management thinking about capability inside this organisation, and what are employees, and also maybe externals. And in some cases, externals could be suppliers. In some cases, they could be customers. In other cases, they could be the board, people not involved in the day-to-day executive management. And we found that by doing it this way, we get a much better and holistic view. And what you end up doing is creating a whole heap of conversations, because all of a sudden you're saying, well, hang on, management's got this aspiration for innovation, which is incremental or gradual change. But guess what? The board is looking for radical or significant change. And the board is focused on growth, and management seems to be focused on profit. All of a sudden you start to get insights. So although you've got these 8 principles here, when I run through the data, there's always a context, because every organization is different. We know it has its own DNA, its own situation. Some companies will have flat revenue streams. Some will have declining. Some will have greatly increasing. Some will be in scale up. Some will be mature organizations. Some will be small and medium-sized organizations. Some will be large. Some will have high levels of debt. Some will have problems with profitability. We take all that into consideration. So these are the 8 levels. In our assessment, what we've developed through our tool and taking information from the database, we've actually got 15 underlying measures that we do. And some of those measures are measures of aspiration, and some of them are scores of ability. So now we expand this out a little bit. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but this is quite interesting. We took information from our global database, and you can see there on the second line, it's based on a representative sample of the global manufacturing industry. So, for example, in our database, we have over 5,000 organisations who have done assessments. We've taken a segment of it, which is the global manufacturing industry, and we're looking at the average of those scores. And we start to see some really interesting stuff. So everybody knows the traffic light system. Green must be good, orange is so-so, and red's bad. Yeah. And what we've been able to do is apply our scoring to these from the information that we've collected on organisations. And we're able to look a little bit deeper around these 8 principles as well. Now, I'm not going to go through each of those, but I will go to the one in the top right-hand corner called culture, because that's really interesting, because we can see we've got a score there of 1 and we've got a score of 5. Yeah. Now, anybody involved in innovation will know in every organisation there's the talk of innovation and then there's the walk of innovation, and often they're 2 different things. And I reckon this is the best example of showing you the walk and the talk. So what we've got is we've got a score of 1 because when we've worked out the assessment and gone through these organisations, we see the supportive culture for innovation scores a 1. However, the organisational buy-in, i.e. the talk for innovation, is 5. Yeah, we're going to be an innovative company. We're going to support innovation. But actually the supportive culture, people, times, resources, there's a whole level of information below this, but basically if you think people, time, resources to do innovation is non-existent in the average of the global manufacturing sector. So I really like that one, because that gives you a real insight and shows you from a practical sense how standards and the measures being developed in these standards can really help organisations to overcome hurdles in their innovation efforts. And AJ mentioned some work that we do, and there was a great PwC report recently, and it's one that they've been running for a number of years, and it's to do with global CEOs. And basically the ability that they were most concerned about that would stop their organisations progressing was the ability to be able to innovate effectively. So not the ability to get the right talent, not the ability to be able to meet bills, not the worries about regulation, etc. Their biggest concern was about their ability to be able to effectively innovate. So therefore, developing your capabilities sounds like a pretty good thing to do. So look, again, I won't go into a lot of detail on this particular one, but there's an example across an industry level. And of course, we could then compare a particular or individual company to this as well. So I'll keep moving along, AJ, if we can, just so now this is scoring, as you can see, from the 15 different individual sectors that make up those 8. And I'm not going to go into there too much, but basically we've aligned these 15 measures and scores with those 8 principles in there. And if you just press the next slide, please, AJ. Immediately there's some areas in here, and this is again highlighting these areas hear about the walk and the talk. So those first three green bars on the left are all about the aspiration for innovation, what the organisation says it will do. And management says, yeah, we're behind innovation. That's why it's got a score of 5. And then in this particular organisation, and this is a real organisation, by the way, it's different to the generic industry one that I just showed you. Even employees say, yeah, we all want to do innovation. When it comes down to it, these guys don't have a supportive culture for it, and they don't have adaptability in their leadership styles. And I won't go through that in now, but very quickly through these assessments, when you've got automated assessments and ways of comparing it back to standards, you get some really quick insights into organisation. And in fact, we often get told, how did you guys work out that about this organisation? Because we haven't told you that. And you just start to see stuff in the data. Anybody that's involved in data will know what we're talking about. You start to read things in data. And if you have a context of the organisation, i.e. what industry they're operating in, what does it look like, what are the things they're facing, what's their strategic intent, you can start to answer questions and give them insights. So that's what's really powerful, and what we really like about what's happening with these ISO standards as well. It's going to give people a way of looking at their organisations. And I made some comments there in the chat box before. Just to reiterate, there is really good alignment between these ISO innovation standards and the ISO 9001 quality management standards. So anybody that's dealt with the ISO 9001 quality management standards, you'll know inside that, in ISO 9001, you have to give a context to the organisation. You have to talk about leadership. You have to talk about operations. You have to talk about support for running a good business. And quality management now is not compliance. It's about, if you do these things, then you should be running a better business, not just doing things right, but also doing the right things. And so what you'll find is these ISO standards have been harmonised with that. So if anybody ever wants to, bring up and say, wow, we want to implement a new innovation management system, it's not hard to write that into your existing business management system, which might be based around ISO 9001. So we get that quite often. People say, oh no, we're not going to introduce another management system. We've got our business management system based on ISO 9001. It's a really easy thing to be able to do, to take what's in the innovation standards and apply them into parts of people's existing innovation or business management systems based on ISO 9001. So I just make that point there, there's harmonisation. Obviously, the reason that the ISO documents were developed, and that we find this all the time as well, there's stuff you'll know that's going on in innovation in organisations, but then there's stuff you don't know. And that's the old story about what's going on below the waterline in the iceberg. That's the stuff that can hurt you. And it's usually stuff that's long-term, deeply ingrained. And we usually find that in terms of capabilities, there's capabilities that are strengths. There's capabilities that are clear weaknesses, and we all agree on it. And then there's capabilities that we disagree on, and they can be blockers to innovation. So one of the most common ones of those is silos across different parts of the organisation. We don't collaborate, we don't share. Yeah, so that's what we find. And you can create these dashboards of information on there when you're using these ISO documents. And we've developed an innovation IQ score out of 100, for example. And different scores allow different parts of the organisation. So no one organisation is an innovative organisation. And we have a framework, as we said, for how we do this. You can have a look at this in the slides that'll come out afterwards. But we measure through the ISO approach, but we've got like I say, an online database. We've got artificial intelligence for interpreting results that we get through. So we're able to tell people what their aspiration for innovation appears to be, but then we're able to offset that and say, but this is your ability. So you might have an aspiration for growth, but you don't have the capability for growth of innovation. You may have the aspiration to be a technology driver or a need seeker of innovation, but you don't have the ability for that. And so we end up making recommendations around that area. And as AJ said, the standard even calls for it as well. Do an assessment, work on your innovation management system, start to develop capabilities, and then reassess again. And that's the same with other standards like the ISO 9001s as well. This is just the process that we use for doing that. it basically follows the guidelines inside the ISO document. I'm not going to run through that, but basically, if you have a good process, this can happen pretty quickly. I know in our practice, we can do assessments on organisations. If everybody's aligned and well organised, even large organisations, we can do those in periods from like sort of 3 to 4 weeks for a short assessment, up to like 12 weeks if it's a very large organisation, multiple divisions, business units, etc. Now, if you try and do all of that manually with just qualitative interviewing, you never get enough inputs and you never get enough people. So, for example, we did assessment last year, and I can talk about this, I won't give you any much detail, but we did an assessment on Petronas Oil and Gas up in Kuala Lumpur, up in Malaysia last year. We did 9 divisions of their business, and we did 44 polls, and we got results for 4,000 people. And we were able to find out that their innovation capabilities varied greatly across the organisation. There was pockets of radical innovation, and there was guys that weren't even good at basic innovation. So there was processes that were excellent in some pockets and non-existent processes in other pockets as well. And that's what standards and having standard definitions and terminology is all about, because you can then start to have a basis to compare against. And we're not giving my interpretation of what innovation means. Here's the standard. It's got a definition. Innovation is an outcome, and it's ideas that are implemented and add value. We don't have to have a discussion on that anymore. And then when we talk about incremental innovation, we can say that's gradual change. But radical innovation, which sounds a bit funny, is actually just significant change. So, that's the other great thing about innovation standards and standardization is we get the verbiage and the terminology and the language consistent in organizations. Okay, let's keep going. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to go too much forward. Just keep going forward, please, AJ, to the next slide. And let's go to the next one. So what I've done is now we've got a real organization. This is a defense company. And first off, if you ever get the ISO standard, there's a section in there, clause 5, around leadership. And leadership paints the picture for innovation. And this company said it's considering innovation is a key to its future. So that's great. They get a tick. They also say it's in line with their strategic goals, and they've defined an innovation strategy, and they've got activities are being carried out within that. That all comes under clause 5 leadership. And then they're backing that up, which is the next points. They've got operations in place, they've got performance evaluation in place, and they've got continuous improvement in there. But overall, their innovation score, you can go to the next one. Overall, this is a mature organisation making pretty sophisticated type products, let's put it that way. But their overall readiness score is only 2.9 out of 5. And you can see there highlighted in the background, just as a shadow, that they've got some real red areas. So there's definitely opportunity to align their innovation strategy and take some targeted steps to improve. And by using the standards approach, you can pinpoint down the areas that they need to focus on. You've got 8 areas, and depending on how sophisticated your assessment process is, you can get very deep. Like we can get uber deep, but even manually reading through the documents, you'll be able to get a new level of readiness and assessment in the organisation. And we identified there was 4 areas to address, because if they don't do that, they could end up as blockers for this organisation. Okay, let's go to the next one. So some of the recommendations, for example, that came up here is these guys need to get more radical. They only do incremental innovation. They don't do significant change. And management buying in on that and recognising it and having a conversation and committing to that is really good. And the other part too is then looking at their portfolio. When we went through that, we said, well, show us. If you say you are doing some significant change projects, let's see those. And then when they couldn't demonstrate those, then they immediately recognised, great, we have to go out searching for stuff that's more significant, because otherwise we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. We're going to keep following the competitors or just staying ahead. They recognised that they need to be more of a market reader. They weren't as good on competitive analysis and understanding the market as what they thought, and that was brought out. And their approach to being technology driver was they were quite conservative. They only actually went with technologies that were quite well proven, which means you better have the capability to be able to take those to market fast and understand what's going on in the market. And they were all about innovating products, but we were able to show them that for their aspiration, they needed to actually innovate their business model and more on their organisation because they didn't have those things in place. And then they needed to change some of their leadership because they had a leadership that was, in some cases, not focused on the right things for building the current business. And they needed to add some leadership capabilities to be able to search for the new business. And also they were trying to do everything themselves. So we actually identified that external collaboration was lacking in what they did, and not just external collaboration to try and make the whole market pie bigger, but to try and embed competitive advantage by linkages. So they've now started a program, for example, with suppliers and partners in innovation efforts, and going deeper in with academics and others developing industry groups. So now they've seen the need not to be so afraid about collaboration, external collaboration. So that was quite interesting as well. Okay, let's just flick on then, AJ. So then this one, you'll see this in the slides, so I'm not going to go through that there. But they had a lack of clear vision and objectives for innovation. We could show them that, and we could give them data. We found, as it says there in the second sentence, we found that just over 70% are saying they don't know or disagree that we have a clear vision and objectives for innovation. On the other hand, we had 30% that said, yeah, that is correct or almost correct. So if we've got different parts of the organisation saying different stuff, this could be a blocker, because some parts of the organisation will be saying, yeah, we know what we're doing, and other parts are saying, we've got no idea what we're doing. So these are good things to bring out. And then about, where are their ambitions? They didn't have a innovation process in the organisation. Innovation process is ideating, selecting, developing, and commercialising. And they were particularly weak in selection. We often see this. Ideas is not the problem. It's selecting the right things is the problem. So that's something that we find. And again, like we said, independent market research, looking at competitors, we were able to drill right down into a lot of capabilities and help them. And anybody using the document would be able to do that. They'd just be able to do it at a different level. So as we said, different approach is a way through there. Okay, let's keep going as well, AJ. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is a case that you guys are going to get access to. Let's keep going through the next slide, please. Yeah. So then you can see their overall score is 2.9 out of 5. So there's definitely room for improvement. If I could go to the next slide, please. Yep. They don't have a strong aspiration for whether they're going for profit or growth. Yeah, which is kind of funny. And that's compared to the average organisation. If we compared these guys to the top 25% of innovators, there would be a huge gap in their aspiration for growth or profit. So this is something that leadership needs to work out. They need to make it clear in the organisation, are we going for growth or are we going for profit? Because there's different capabilities required for each of those approaches and aspirations. Let's do the next one. This one is about having a clear for whether they're going for incremental or radical. And they're clearly saying, we want to go for incremental. Yet everybody knows with innovation, if you don't have some aspiration for significant change, you're never going to be any better than your competitors, and you'll probably be behind them as well. We can just flick through to the next one, AJ. Yeah, this one was interesting in terms of, do we have a vision and are we scoring on it? We saw that was weak. And as we said, 70% of the organisation said they don't know or disagree that we have a clear vision for innovation. Well, that's a failure of leadership. They need to give that. Let's go to the next one. This is about leadership styles. Their leadership style, their natural leadership style is a leadership style that we see is thinking more about the future and building that future with existing resources and capabilities. And we actually advised them that They need to build a leadership style that questions the status quo and questions their business model. And also they need to get some basics right in their current business about having a clear vision, understanding the market, understanding competitors, and doing better in the current business. And when they do better in the current business, they'll make more profit. When they make more profit, then they can invest out in future opportunities. So that's where it is. So sometimes we see leadership that's focused too far on the future and always about the next big thing, and they haven't got the capabilities built correctly for the current business, which drives profit. Let's go to the next one. What else? Yeah, so this is all around process. I told you here, this organisation and the average organisation has a pretty poor innovation management process. And process, we said, is ideation, selection, development, and commercialisation. I won't spend time on this, but you guys can look at the details here. We highlighted some of their individual scores that are weaknesses in there. And for them, the selection phase of the innovation process is the weakest. And we gave them some recommendations around specific capabilities to focus on. Next one, please, AJ. Yeah, so that gives you an idea in how you can break down the standard into measures that are really, really quite easy to do. And, you know, this stuff, we're even doing these assessments now online in this current environment that we're all working in. So AJ and his nice new little workshop there, and me and my workshop. But we do online workshops with clients all the time, and sometimes we do kick-off workshops with executive management teams. We can run broader groups, awareness across companies for innovation. And then we can run an assessment online where people go online, answer 92 questions, and we get an understanding about the capabilities of the organisation. And then we turn it into data that aligns to these ISO standards that we're making awareness of. And that's basically it. So I think I've used more than my time, and I think we're going to allow some time now for questions if that's needed. Or I think Bobak, at least I know you got one question.
Yeah, I've got the question. By the way, before I ask you my questions, everybody can raise their hands or post your question on the chat box. I guess everyone has got the access to the chat box that we can ask the questions. I start from my question now. Thank you so much, Peter and AJ. Basically, the question I've got is more relation to you know, innovation management to KM in a very broad sense. I'm just wondering if there are any kind of anywhere in ISO 56000 serious addressing about the KM practice. For example, in terms of how the knowledge sharing can leverage the innovation management and success rate. Is there anywhere actually addressing that in the book? I haven't had the chance to look at it.
Yeah, if you there's a figure, and I'll just try and pull up this, get AJ, if you can pull up the slide, which is that one you said was very boring. Yeah, but yeah, there's
broad,
slide.
no, this is very broad, this question.
Yeah, that's cool. No. This is one that AJ said.
Yeah,
slide 18. Slide 18. Yeah,
okay.
So if you can get to there, AJ. Within that, knowledge management is there because under context of the organisation, and also which is clause 4 in the document, and also under clause 7, which is support, that's resources, competencies, and other support. That's probably where knowledge management comes in.
I see.
And also in the innovation management system, in the innovation process, ideate, select, develop, commercialize. Okay. Before we ideate, we have to discover. And knowledge management comes in because things we discover, we need to make sure that we're capturing those in the organisation and that everybody across the organisation knows that.
Yep.
So there's knowledge management, within organisations, and who has access to all of that. So I think you'll find that in that particular, no, it's not that one, AJ, it's the next one. Sorry, go to the next slide. Yeah, that one. So if we go to that one, then this is where knowledge management is captured under different sections. So when you read through the document, you'll find that it's covered under context of the organisation.
I see.
Because we have knowledge there.
I see.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also under support, we have knowledge there.
I see.
And in processes, which comes under operations clause 8, we have knowledge there as well.
And I guess performance evaluation.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's things.
Yep.
And then we use knowledge management in improvement under clause 10.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So I think there's really good alignment, but you know, it takes a little while to see the dots.
That's right.
And when the diagrams are boring like this one, like it just takes a little while to get your head around them. That's all. Yeah.
That's cool. Thank you so much. While we're waiting for any further questions, I don't want to be the first one or only one to asking questions. Anybody?
Here we've got one from
Murray.
If someone asks you to come in and set up an innovation hub so it can be there, what do you say? This is good. So we would go back and in ISO talk, right? But we never talk ISO talk with busy executives because they don't get it. Yeah. So we come back to leadership aspiration. So leadership aspiration, and this is context of the clause 5, leadership. We'll say come back to it's a little bit like that question. Has everybody ever heard that quote? Technology was the answer, but what was the question? Right? Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase that. I'm going to go, innovation hub was the answer. What was the question? Yeah, right. So I would come back on this one. I would go, why do you see that an innovation hub is the answer? And what led you to deciding that you needed an innovation hub? Yeah, because an innovation hub correlates to a leadership style that we talk about, which is I need new resources and capabilities to develop innovation in this organisation. You don't need, or maybe it's an internal innovation hub. If you say I'm going to use existing resources and capabilities over time, that's a leadership style. So if it's an internal innovation hub, or is it an external innovation hub, i.e. we're going to bring in startups and scale-ups, and then you start to talk about strategy. Well, what happens when you bring people into the innovation hub? We had a discussion the other week with an organisation, and they bring in startups, but they never acquire any of those startups. They just use it for learnings. And then they progress the startups along to a certain point. They help incubate them, and then they let them leave the nest. So you could say, well, isn't that lost opportunity if you don't acquire those resources? Or are you just trying to steal ideas and then use your own resources and capabilities to develop off that stuff later on? So it really comes back to leadership style, I think, Murray. That would be my one. I'd go back to, why did you think you needed an innovation hub in the first time? Just tell me 3 things that led you to the decision that we need an innovation hub. And often they'll say, oh, well, we had these guys come in and say we need to be doing this because we're a corporate and we're big and slow. We're like a steam engine. And we need to be as efficient, AJ will talk to this at some point in time, we'll be efficient as a tandem bike. We've got 2 people pedaling along. And if you do the analysis on a tandem bike, the amount of energy that you have to expend for what you get out is fantastic. So lots of ideas, and a good process is like being on a tandem push bike. Having a process and a lack of ideas is like being in a steam engine. You just don't get anywhere fast. Yeah. So that's what I would say. I'd go back, talk about why did you think you needed an innovation hub in the first place? Great question.
Right.
Sorry, AJ, have you got anything you want to add on to that?
No, just thank you for using my innovation management efficiency matrix, Peter. It was good.
All right. If there is no other question, I go with another one. Is coming back to the kind of the current climate, basically epidemics area or situation that we have globally for the businesses to survive. Basically, just wanted to see the connection of the ISO or the innovation management for the businesses to survive or hopefully through. In terms of obviously the innovation management, they used to be, or nowadays still thinking about the innovation management, or innovation is more about the incremental improvement. Now they getting to the stage that some of the businesses are thinking about the radical change and how as businesses from a small to even corporate level can reinvent themselves in order to survive or thrive.
Yeah,
Through the
and
innovation.
just remember, it's in the context of the organisation. So what is significant change to one organisation could be incremental to another. Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you had never had your workforce working remotely before, then you've just gone radical. Yeah, because that's significant change, and you would have had to do a lot of things in the yeah, I was talking with AJ. I sort of have this 666, the number of the beast approach to this current situation. So what are people doing in the first 6 days, the first 6 weeks, and the first 6 months? Yeah. So first off, if you have not been working remotely at all, and all your processes, systems, etc., were set up that people had to turn up at the office every day, that's a pretty big thing. My son's business that he works for, they are they're a design, industry and design, so industrial design type company. Think of them as that. They have huge, powerful machines, but nobody worked from home because all the machines were at work. So, you know, they had to just go through the simple thing of how do we get these supercomputers working from home with everybody's internet connections and being as productive as what we can. So that was pretty radical for them. So I would suggest it depends on where people are at this point in time. You need to find a way to survive first off. That's number one. Then you need to work out, right, what are the important things we need to do, which is securing cash flow. And I've said to everybody in this situation, everybody needs to secure cash flow because you're definitely going to have cash going out, and you've got to work out where cash flow is coming in. So you better know that. That's a good knowledge management thing for me. So anybody on the line with financial background, you must be pretty much in demand. That's the first thing. That'll get you kind of like, this is where we are in the first 6 weeks. And then we need to focus on what are we going to do in the next 6 months. And so people, I would say, need to gain knowledge about their competitors and their industry. What's going on with regulations? What's going on with support? What are my competitors doing? And this could be opportunity or threat, because if they're moving and you're not, then that's a problem. So I'm actually a supporter of the government incentives, because I think what it does is gives people time to hold on to resources that are hard to get. I mean, you think about resources, how hard they are to get, to train. We want to maintain all of those. And it's given, really what the government's doing is giving us the gift of time to be able to work out what we should do in this new world. Yeah. Now, some people will say it's going to go back to how it was before, so we just need to wait it out. Can we do that? That's kind of where we are. So I think you know, short form looking at the innovation management capabilities is a hard thing to do unless you've got some pretty sophisticated tools. But we've got some assessments we're doing with people at the moment and working out stuff in the 6 weeks for what they need to focus on in the 6 months. So for one of my clients, we're focusing very much around selection criteria because they were very weak on that. And even now, people need to be making selection criteria about what they need to do and what they don't do. And so we're keeping it really simple. What's going to be the most feasible with your circumstances, and what's going to have the greatest impact? And sometimes, you know, you have to focus on the current. You've got to focus on profit over growth. You've got to focus on utilisation of resources. You've got to focus on, is there anything in my organisation that's blocking us at this point in time? And if you've got silos in your organisation, people will already have come across this in the first couple of weeks. Silos just get amplified in this sort of circumstances. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
And is there anywhere in ISO documents addressing or talking about the chaotic situation or managing kind of emergency situation in terms of innovation?
I think it comes down to, if I look through sections on that, it would be prepared. You know, you need to have scenarios. So we've actually got a webinar we did with another group the other day, and they talked about scenario analysis. And that's really, you don't have a lot of time to do that at the moment, but you do need to have some scenarios. So I'll talk about Peter. So what did Peter do one night? He said, he made the mistake of looking at his share portfolio and his superannuation. Yeah, that was a dumb thing to do, because I saw like 45% of it disappeared. But I came up with some scenarios and just said, under this scenario, this will happen, this will happen, and this will happen. And therefore, what decisions would I make and what selections would I choose if they were the scenarios? And I think that's a thing for organisations at the moment as well. Scenario analysis allows you then to make choices and decisions, because you may say, I need to hold on to these assets and I need to let these ones go, or I need to invest now. And we are actually seeing organisations saying, you know what, now's the time to spend money on A, B, and C. So scenario analysis and selection criteria, two big things for me out of there, and they're both supported inside the document in the ISO documents as well.
Perfect.
Cool.
While waiting for any other questions, or the people who have got any knowledge they're from their organization that they can share it, we're pretty much happy to hear that from anyone, especially specifically to these days, business survival or any kind of good story you have heard. Apart from that is the focus, I guess, through the presentation, innovation, you mentioned, AJ, that's innovation management is about, all these different type of companies, businesses, from a small to a startup to basically corporate level or large level. But one of the things at the moment, mostly small businesses have been impacted, is the people or small businesses trying to survive in this kind of current climate. Is there anywhere specifically addressing how the small businesses can actually manage or have kind of radical innovations or changing the business model, because they are more agile to changing the business model than corporate level, or develop the capability, obviously, because they are much more smaller? Is there any kind of the guideline or advice that you can give the small businesses specifically?
I mean, there's certainly within the innovation management system framework, it talks to context. So looking externally and internally for opportunities. For the smaller businesses, it is about looking at their business model, and either looking opportunities to pivot on that business model or to shift and do something completely differently. And one way to do that is to, I suppose, embrace external factors in the context of their business. So, for example, a lot of restaurants that hadn't done delivery before is now core to their business and probably keeping their business afloat. So understanding the context of the organization and how it lives with both external, internal factors is something that the innovation management system talks to. And then considering both internal and external is how that then influences the culture and then the collaboration. So it's going to fall down, business model innovation and pivoting if there's not a supportive culture and collaboration to do it. So that is core as part of the innovation management system.
Perfect. Yep. Sorry, Peter, you're going to say.
I think the other part too, this is where people very quickly get an idea about core capabilities, and we're not sort of about what they do, they're what they're capable of doing. So we've all seen the guys that have swapped over from making gin to hand sanitizer. Another one of my favorite small companies that's very innovative is a company called, they're in Gloucester, up in regional New South Wales. So inland from Foster on the mid-north coast, for anybody that's trying to pinpoint them on the map. They're called Drifta, D-R-I-F-T-A. And they've pivoted into making facial masks, even though they mainly make camping equipment. But they realised they had a whole heap of capability in terms of being able to sew and materials, etc., like that. So they've pivoted across into those areas as well. So I think the core advice we give to small, medium-sized organisations is look at what do you have capability to be able to do rather than what you've always done. How do you use existing resources in new ways? That's the angle that comes from the innovation standards in there. the trouble is just making time to be able to do that, to do that. Yeah, so on.
Yep.
So
That's
for
cool.
some people, that's why I say the government stuff is good, because it just gives you that bit of breathing space to be able to think, what are we going to do? And that's people we're talking to are saying, yeah, let's use this 6 weeks to work out what's going to happen in the 6 months.
Exactly.
And if it's less than 6 months, fantastic.
Yeah.
And then think, is your world going to go back to what it was? Probably, if I'm hearing on the news, Virgin's isn't going to go back to what it was. So Virgin may not be around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I heard that.
Yeah.
On the news.
So
That's right.
Yeah. What decisions would their competitors be making at this point in time?
Yep.
And they may actually decide to invest and start to build resources, capabilities, because people are going to want to fly again sometime.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
So the scenario is that going to be 3 months or 6 months or 12 months?
Yep.
And then, you need to have all your people in your organization talking around that. Yeah. So, I don't know. I think, there was a plan, wasn't there, where Virgin were in a big acquisition of new fleet. Well, those suppliers, those orders were going to disappear. They'd be thinking about what's going on in their organization as well. So I think that's where the scenario analysis comes in.
Yep.
Is my world going back to the way it was before?
Yep.
Yep. And do I just have to hold out, or what do I need to do to survive in between?
That's right.
Or what are the new opportunities that we hadn't thought of before?
Yep.
So that's where I like scenario analysis.
Exactly.
Cool.
Anyone that wants to actually talk, they can unmute themselves and start talking. That's fine. You don't have to write the question if you want to. So basically these days I'm talking to mostly small businesses because they're really the one actually are really stuck in survive. And one of the things you're telling them, or we have a conversation, is we need to have a daily strategy rather than even years of strategy nowadays. And one of the daily strategies is trying things, new things. And one of the things can help you is a radical innovation strategy, and you need to get to know that radical innovation strategy. See how you can actually daily basis, even monthly, as you said, even weekly basis, you can develop some new idea and try them in a structured way rather than trial and error type of things. And that's where the innovation definitely helps you, and that's where they start digging to innovation management and ideation process, because that's the only thing that can change the business model and survive. And one of the things is mostly they talking about is 5% of the most profitable customers that you're dealing with, just focusing on those customers right now in order to focusing the whole capability on those customers. That's quite interesting as well. There are lots of discussion around that.
We spoke to an organisation the other day, and I won't say who they are, but they have a subscription model for their clients.
Yep.
So you could say, great, we've got a subscription model. People are paying us money every month, whether they do stuff with us or not. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. But they end up the money that they subscribe with, they end up using. It's just a point in time when they will use that money.
Yep.
But they went out immediately and they said to all of their customers, we know you're facing a hard time. We've just reduced your subscriptions for the next 6 months by 30%. So they were proactive. So they secured their cash flow, but they gave relief to all of their customers.
Yep.
And so they got in and did that first. So all of their customers, they had quite a strong response to that.
Yep. Yep.
The other thing that you're talking about, trying new things, is something that we even do too. It's one capability is called about A/B testing.
Yep.
So you try 2 different ways of doing something.
That's
and
right.
You can do it quite quickly.
Yep.
So I often give this example. There's a newsletter that I subscribe to, and they send out a daily newsletter. It's in the space around startups, investments, etc.
Yep.
But they take 20% of their database every morning, and they send one headline on the email to 10%, and they send another headline, Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
They watch that for the first hour. Whichever one gets the most opens, then they send that to the other 80%. Now that's something that a small business can do pretty quickly. Not that exact one, but that's what we talk about. Quick, fast things that you don't have to spend a lot of time on.
Exactly. So
because we're all searching at the moment for that
solution.
cut-through email.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a great example of saying, well, let's try this, see which one gets the most opens.
Exactly.
And then whatever our messaging is, let's try that.
That's right.
That's really important for small businesses.
So we have got the question from Matthew. Matthew, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, or I can read through that? Okay, we have got the question from Matthew. It says, the large organizations suffer from the silos innovation, asset capability focus on different business priorities being managed separately. What has been your experience in beginning to coordinate these asset investments capability together?
Yeah. Okay. Driving while listening. That's good. So he's been safe. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Good work, Matthew. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So in large organizations, usually we recognize this as well. We try and get sponsorship from C-level and from the executive. We sometimes just try and do an assessment in one part of the organization, and then it's almost like, hey, what are those guys working on and what happened with the results there? So what we try and find is, yes, you will, because let's be quite honest, we've got parts of the organization where the management is absolutely focused on this month's, this quarter's, this year's P&L, yeah, and results. And they will sacrifice long-term innovation for short-term gain. But then again, in those organizations, we mainly find, Matthew, that they are being incentivized on short-term. So if you've got a general manager running a current business, yeah, whose whole incentive plan is around profit and what he's doing now, he is not going to invest money in Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 efforts that'll pay off in 5 years' time, because who knows, he might not even be around. You know, we had a very large organisation that said, you know, Peter, come back and talk to us because our CEO retires in 2 years. He has a share option plan and he is just optimising every investment to drive profit in this next 2 years. So we're not even thinking about anything in terms of longer term innovation. We're only focused on short-term continuous improvement that will drive profit. So I suppose you've got to break it up. Matthew, would be our advice. Get a part of the organisation doing that, and then make sure that that's getting shared back to the executive, especially in large organisations. It's very hard to try and do it in all parts of the organisations everywhere. We showed in the presentation an innovation score there. You saw that was 61. Yeah. That was for an international organisation that had 2 major divisions. And then we did an assessment across that. And we did actually did assessments across 77 parts of their organisation. So the average score was 61. But we had scores that varied from 19, that's 19 in the teens, to 92. So I suppose what you do is, you know, this is where you need to be smart, savvy about the organisation. Try and get some sponsors at C-level. Yeah. Do parts of the organisation, create awareness about capability, and then share pockets across organisations. So we've even done assessments across organisations, but when we look at regional capability, it varies dramatically. So then what we're able to do to help break down silos is say, you know what? We've got the team in South Australia. They're really innovative. Yeah. In fact, you'd call them radical, those guys down there. And we start to share some of what they're doing with other parts of the organisation that have got innovation problems. So that's the way that we usually do. Break up the organisation, look for pockets where people are doing things differently. They might be pursuing a different strategy. They might be more a technology driver, or they might be more a need seeker, or they might be a better market reader, or they might be more radical in their approach, or there might be particular capabilities they've got strength in. Like they might have really strong strengths in the selection part of the process, in the innovation process. Another part might be very strong in ideation. But usually when we look at those stuff, people who are strong in ideation and not strong in selection tend to make wrong selection. and things get through and they waste money on development and commercialization. And of course, that's not just wasted money, but it's also wasted time because you could have been putting that on something else. So break down the organisation, I suppose, is my answer. But getting C-level support is definitely the big one.
Yep, I think Mary has got.
I have a question.
Yep,
I have a question.
Yep.
Just further to your comment, Peter, in answering Matthew's question, how often do you see the organisation's performance management process or system as a direct contributor to lack of performance or a barrier to innovate?
Yeah, the nice thing about it is we get to collect, in our approach, we get to collect this data. Yeah. So we can go, hey, look, I'm only showing you the data. Yeah. Management says this. Employees are saying this. This division's saying this. This is saying this. All I'm saying to you, Mr. Chief Executive and Executive Management Team, we don't get this sorted out, you're going to have problems. You're going to have blockers to innovation. So we need to clear this, and you're the guys that are able to do that. Yeah. So yeah, we are able to do that, and then we're able to work with HR. So we didn't show it, but we've got elements in the assessment, and it's talked about in the ISO 56004, the assessment one, that we talk about leadership for innovation, and we talk about culture for innovation. And so we go further. We're actually able to produce an innovation culture map. And I've seen organisations who think they're really strong in innovation, but are actually blocking it. And all we do, that's the nice thing about collecting lots of data from lots of people in the organisation. We're working with data rather than opinion, because everybody knows, you know, I don't know if you guys, I've got this T-shirt, I've got to print one up. Anyway, it says, you know, data greater than opinion. Yeah. And I think, you know, if you go back to the original guys that did quality management, you know, one of the famous sayings there is, in God we trust, everybody else has to bring data. So when you bring data to organisations and you say, we've got a problem here, your people are saying it's a problem, you're recognising it as a problem, right, so why aren't we doing something about it? So then you could change that, and we could say, change that. We saw this in a legal firm in their innovation efforts, and one of their barriers to innovation was, guess what? They have to write down every 6 minutes what the hell they're doing. Yeah. And so they said, we don't have time to innovate. So the only people who were innovating were doing it in their own time. Do you know what that organisation, this is a legal firm, you know, dry, hard partners who all want their money and want everybody working 3,000 hours a year so that they make money, and booking it to clients. Yeah. So what they gave as a reward for innovation was hours. You just got given 20 hours to innovate, and you can put that on your timesheet. And the difference that it made in culture inside that organisation was fantastic. I've now got permission. Other organisations give people, you know, innovation checks. Okay, that's a great idea. You've got $5,000. Give us a plan of what you're going to do with it. You don't have $5,000 to spend. You've got $5,000 plan. So come back with a plan. Tell us what you're going to learn, and that sort of stuff. So we got another one of our clients. He sent 2 of his regional directors on an international, you'd say, oh, that's just a jaunt. But they actually went overseas, went to a couple of technology fairs, met with clients in other countries, met with suppliers that they would never meet with, and that's what they spent their innovation money on. So giving people permission and that sort of stuff. I think that, does that help, Murray? Does that give a bit of an answer?
Yeah, no, that was good. In fact, just what you were saying there, I heard a long time ago that DuPont, who are very, very, very not, you wouldn't think of them as, you would think of them more as bureaucratic than as innovative in the way that we think of it. But they said, oh, we had a guest speaker, and he said, oh no, we've actually built it into our bureaucracy. We've built innovation into our bureaucracy because everybody at every level knows exactly how much they've got to spend, that they can just sign off without getting any approval for innovation to come up with new ideas. And so they said, so at a certain level, you might have $5,000 or $10,000 or $50,000 that you can spend as long as you submit the appropriate documents in the appropriate points of the system. And then they said, and that's it. And if you botch it up, doesn't matter. And he said, gave one example of somebody that spent something like $40,000 on something. And they said, it's not going to work. And he went, yes, it will. And so he did it. It botched completely. They buggered it up completely. But he got a reward he ended up getting a bonus because he gave it a shot.
Yeah, but he learned a lot.
Yeah,
and he created new knowledge.
And
That's
look
right.
at DuPont are continually reinventing themselves every 15 years.
Yeah.
They've built
just,
it into their body, into their
yeah. And just remember, with innovation, you know, when we know everything, that's the current business. We should know everything about the current business. We should know the market.
Did we lost
Peter? The pricing.
Yep,
sorry.
No
Yeah. So we should know all about that. So we can use a business case approach. But when you're uncertain, all right, you can't use a business case approach. You can't come in now and say, Murray, you know, that innovation, how many units of that are we going to sell in 2025? You've got no idea. And if you put a number, you're just making it up. Yeah, right. So what you need is an investment plan. So that's what we talk about in building the now business with innovation. That's business case, because you've got certainty, or you can pretty much work out what you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
But when things are uncertain and there might be future opportunities, then you need an investment plan. And not all investments pay off, like my super. Yeah.
That's right.
Cool.
That's cool. Just watching out any further question. If there is no further question, we may actually stop it in here. We have 30 minutes till 7 in Australian time. Just want to conscious about the time. And all right, let's stop it in here. I just wanted to really appreciate and thank you, Peter and AJ, for participating here. Such a great honor to have you guys in our community, and also your great presentation. I hope we can share the slides and also video with everyone. And in case of anyone has got any further question or he needs to have a conversation with you guys, I guess I can share your details and they can reach out. Yep, no problem with that. So just stop.